Hi, I'm Jim Halloran with Community Arts in Arlington, part of Arlington County Parks and Recreation. And today I'll be doing a demonstration on something I'm asked quite often. How do you paint flowers? So what I have here today is I have a photograph that I took very recently that I cropped here with lots of different colors and a lot of different things going on here. It's kind of a complicated photo, but I'm going to show you how to break it down into something a little bit more manageable so we can actually paint today. I have a piece of paper today. Sometimes I paint on canvas, but today I'll be doing acrylic on paper because it is a different feel. And you can see here, I taped the sides of my paper as well so that we can have a nice bit of magic at the end, pulling the tape off. We'll have a nice clean white frame. That's kind of one of the best parts of painting on paper is pulling off that tape. I'll be using acrylic today. So I have everything kind of set up that I need. That's a good kind of housekeeping rule for any artist is kind of put out all the materials that you need. And then I'll just go over a little bit what I'll be using today. But I like to have everything out this way. I don't have to get out of my seat or think about maybe where did I put that white paint. Okay, so my acrylic paint I put here onto just a piece of foil. That's what you call your palette. They sell professional palettes, but foil is going to work for me today because I'm not going to be saving the paint. The thing with acrylic is it dries up and you just toss it when you're done. I have an array of brushes. So my brushes today are a little different than what I might normally use, but these are very soft synthetic brushes. So what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes a brush can be very bristly and rough and kind of like a strong brush that can hold really thick paint. These are more like watercolor / acrylic brushes, so that I'm going to be using the paint in a little bit different way today, kind of watered down, so not just super thick. And you can see they're just a different sizes and different shapes as well. So it's a good just have a nice range. You can see I brought extra brushes from home just in case I might need an extra one. I have my paper towel, I have my cup of water, and I have my pencil. That's about it. That's all I'm going to pretty much need. You might be wondering why this is green. That's some prep work I did today, so you don't have to watch me just paint a piece of paper green, right? That's not as interesting. But basically, I've been treating my paper or my canvas beforehand, meaning I put some color down first so I'm not dealing with white right off the bat. It's a great way to kind of get started in a little bit of a less frustrating, easy manner, because sometimes working on white, all you see is those mistakes early on, and that can be kind of frustrating. Whereas painting on color, you have some success right off the bat. You might ask why green? Well, if you look at this photograph, you probably can guess why. Lots of green. So I'm saving time already, right? I'm not painting around colorful flowers or leaves, right? I'm starting with green and I'm going to add to it. That's like an additive method, right? I'm not painting around flowers. I'm adding flowers onto the green. So is this the right color? Is this green? Absolutely not, but it's just a starting point. What I like to tell my students is that you just want to get in the ballpark in the beginning, right? You just want to do an approximation. It doesn't have to be perfect, that exact color. Some artists can pull that off, but the rest of us have to kind of work at it. So this green, nice color. And it just so happened it matched my tape perfectly. That was just coincidental. So the tape will be gone in the end anyways. So I mentioned I have a pencil. A lot of us can't get away with painting without drawing, right? Usually there's some drawing in the beginning. I think my drawing usually is one of the shorter steps, and it's more just like putting down little placeholders on my paper just so that I know where to put some paint. I could probably get away with just putting paint down without pencil, but I think just a few spots might help. And I'm thinking where the flowers are, and then also look at these large gaps here, right, of dark. There's lots of dark shadows here. That might be important just to show a little bit with my pencil. So you're not going to be able to see that on the camera, but I am just making some bigger spots. Right here, I just drew that shape, just where I want it to be dark, just placeholders. And then if I want to, I can add some flowers here as well. Just a few shapes, just a couple placeholders. You might be able to see that one there, just to paint around a little bit. But believe me, I'm going to be adding lots and lots of paint and layers, so I'll probably lose my pencil lines pretty easily. So where do we start? Well, I'm trying to take something very complicated like nature with thousands of leaves and hundreds of flowers and try to make it into something that I can paint. So I'm not going to be counting leaves. I'm not going to be even counting flowers, but I'm just trying to get close, like an approximation. But the idea really is to start with the big stuff and then work down to the detail. So for example, use your biggest brush in the beginning. If you start off with a tiny brush like this, you'll be painting for a long time. And you probably won't like it either, because a small brush, it's treating things too preciously, right? Things aren't precious in the beginning. You want to just get the big idea down on the paper first, right? And make your mistakes in the beginning so that when you're doing those details with that tiny brush at the end, you have a good idea of what it's looking like, right? We don't want to invest too much in detail in the beginning. So with that said, remember I drew with pencil some of these bigger areas of dark? I want to use a big brush and start painting in some dark. The way I paint, I like to go from dark to light. So even though I have a solid green here, kind of a neutral kind of value, it's not too dark, not too light, now I'm going to go from dark and build up to light. So it's kind of like big to small, dark to light. Those are kind of my guiding principles here. So I have lots of different colors here. I have about, 4 blues and 3 yellows. So that's going to give me lots and lots of different options for green. But in here, I'm thinking that's very, very dark green, almost black. So if it's almost black, let's use black. I'm going to put some black down on my palette. I'm only using water to thin out the paint, and that works really well on paper. And then let's do maybe a touch of blue and a touch of this green. And that's a very dark green. If the paint feels too thick and it's not moving on the palette, just add a little bit of water. Okay, so paint on the brush. Is this the right color? Well, we'll find out. Here's those darker areas that I drew in. You could see that. And the brush is squared on top. You can see here, it's a square brush. So it's going to make square brush strokes. And look at just how dry that paint is. In the beginning, I like to add a little bit of water. And make sure you go right down to the paint. The tape, I should say. And fill it in. So I'm using quite a bit of paint here. I've been called a stingy painter, so you could say that's not quite a lot of paint. That's not a lot at all. You might be using more, but kind of a lot for me in the beginning here. I like to use less paint in the beginning, and as I get more confident, I go a little thicker as I go. So those flowers at the end will probably be much thicker than what I'm doing now, which is just kind of the background. Okay, a lot of students say they learn a lot from my mistakes, more than my successes. So check this out. Look, I put a little water down. I'm actually taking paint off of the paper. So that's a clue for me to either use a little bit more paint or stop and let it dry. So I'm going to stop and let it dry because they call that licking the canvas, right? You're pulling off paint, and I'm doing more damage than good. So move on. So here's another shadowy area here. I'm going to sketch that in, fill that in, maybe add a little bit more black. Check that out. There we go. So see what I'm doing here? I'm just putting down some shadows. There's a shadow here. Anywhere it's dark. I can always go back and make it lighter or darker too if I need to, which is good. You're never married to a brush stroke, at least this early on. You can always change it. Watercolors are maybe a little different story. But look at how I'm varying my brush strokes too, going kind of left to right. Okay, see, dark. Where is it dark? Fill in anywhere you see dark. There's another spot here. Can't go wrong. Okay, I'm going to move a little quicker here. That's kind of a, you would call that abstract, right? It's just shape, value, and color. Maybe it gets a little dark. There's some dark spots up here. See that dark spot? Just trying to fill it all in. It's not paint by number, guys, but you can kind of break it down into a simpler, more manageable composition. All right, so now I'm going to build up and not go as dark. I'm going to leave the black out and go with some blue and green, and whatever little leftover black was on my brush. See that? And I'm just going to paint over, kind of half on the dark, half on the green background. See how I'm filling this in? You know, I said in the beginning, like, that green background didn't really matter. It wasn't the perfect green. So this is me kind of changing it to a more perfect green. And quite a bit of water here. I like to water down the acrylic, so it's almost like an opaque watercolor. Okay. And believe me, I'm going to go back and add some darks and lights as I go. Sometimes when you put down, ooh, there we go. That's a nice dark. See, as it dries, I can go a little darker. There we go. Okay, so see how this, very complicated? Lots and lots of detail, right? You're seeing through the detail to the big picture, shadow, and then kind of a neutral green, right? Not too bright. I'm gonna be able to come out and pull out some leaves in a little bit. You're gonna be able to see. This painting is not gonna be overly complicated. I'm gonna try to keep it simple. Okay, up here is a nice lighter green. So I'm gonna add some white to my green and some yellow to lighten it up. Now white, you just have to be careful with because white can desaturate a color and kind of cool it down and make it dull. So that's why I add some yellow too. The yellow keeps it warm. So look, I'm a little too transparent. So let's get a little bit more green here. If your color's not laying on top the way you want to, sometimes you have to add a little bit more paint or even a little bit more white, because white is a bit more opaque. Yellow is a very transparent color. And add some water here. There we go. Better. I'm sure those first strokes I put down, you're all saying, oh, that happens to me, right? Painting is all about kind of making mistakes and learning from them. It's a problem that you're solving. Now notice my brush strokes here, I'm changing up too. Almost to be a little bit more leaf-like. Okay, kind of a mess. Remember I said we were making abstract art in the beginning, and we might make it 3/4 of the way through. So I think now I'm ready. I have the basic kind of background, right? So if painting's all layers, the first step was to get everything covered with a solid green, got my darks, my mediums, and some lights in. Now I'm gonna start pulling out individual leaves. Believe me, the messiness of the background will disappear if I have a really nice kind of detailed leaf in a few areas. So that's what I'm going for. The trick is to find a brush that's kind of the same size as a leaf. So notice the difference between these two brushes. Here I have kind of a squared brush and a rounded brush. So I'm going to try them both and see what we get, but I'm kind of thinking the rounded brush is going to make more of a leaf shape. So let's get some blue and some yellow, and I went for a brighter blue, a cerulean blue, which is kind of a brighter blue. Touch of white too. I'm going to save the real brightest colors for the flowers. So let's see. See if I can get away with just making a few leaves here. So that one brush stroke is a leaf. And look at that, one more layer, right? It's a little transparent. I'm seeing a little bit through to the background, but honestly, it's okay. And I'm trying to make all my leaves go in different directions. That's very important. If all your leaves grow in the same direction, it will become predictable, and we all know that nature is not predictable. I added a little blue to the leaves over here to make them a little darker. Okay, I notice the more water I have, the more the line is less kind of a rough line and more of a solid kind of leaf shape. There we go. And look, I kind of hit my groove, where now I'm a little bit more confident with the shape I'm making. and then every kind of brush stroke is one leaf. If it takes 4 or 5 or 6 brush strokes to make one leaf, you're going to be painting for a long time. So use the right tool for the job, right? I switched up to make sure that my brush kind of matched what I was painting. Big brush for the beginning, smaller brush for the leaf. And look at how things are starting to emerge. Remember, it's all about layers, so there's nothing I'm doing now that I can't kind of touch up later. Also, you might notice that the color does change as it dries, which can be frustrating, so keep that in mind. You can always adjust as you paint. I'm gonna add some more yellow. I'm gonna make these leaves a little brighter here. Aha, look at that. Beautiful, right? Right, I almost didn't know how to paint a leaf in the beginning. I had to practice. So these leaves are not as nice as these leaves up here. And that's natural. The more you do something, the more it becomes kind of a second nature. You gain some muscle memory. Believe me, every time I paint, it feels like I'm learning or relearning something. So look at that. It's almost like wallpaper or a pattern that you'd see on fabric. But it's lovely. I think it's great. And the way I'm painting this too, I'm not going for like deep realism either. I could go in and make every leaf slightly different so that if we were to get really up close, we'd see that they're all very individualized leaves. But at this point, I'm just trying to get some basic shapes down. Doesn't mean I can't make those leaves go in different directions. Okay, I think I'm good with that. You get to set the standard, and I'm saying today my background's going to be a little loose, and I might go back and touch it up a little bit near the end. So believe it or not, I think we're close to adding flowers down. You'd want to let this dry so that your colors don't mix. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to be adding yellow, pink, orange, blue, red, colors that I want in the real purest form. So you can see also my palette here has lots of color that I don't want mixed in. So with that in mind, I can flip down my palette like so, move it around a little bit, and there we go. I have more room for mixing. Believe me, if you don't give yourself enough room, you'll only be mixing in these tiny areas here, and you kind of paint yourself into a corner. Also, wash your brush. You can clean up the water too, but I think I'm okay. Because I'm going to go in now for some reds and oranges and pinks and all that fun color, right? That's why I chose this photograph. Same thing with the leaves. I went from dark to light. Same thing with the flowers, dark to light. So I'm going to put kind of a neutral base down. What do I mean by that? Well, this flower here, for example, I'm going to put just a solid kind of shape, and look at how dark that is. You're going to say this is not that, and I would agree with you. It's the base coat, right? It's just a solid place holder for my flower. So I'm going to do that wherever I see that kind of color flower. I know it's not the right exact color or even shape, but these are just placeholders. It's all layers, guys. You can't get it in one shot. I can tell a lot of times student work because there's an impatience, right? There's I should have this down in one shot. One stroke should be perfect, because we've all seen videos, right, of artists doing it in that way. But it really takes time and layers. So all just placeholders. These are much darker than these, but that's okay. Remember, I'm going from something simple to something complicated. So putting down these placeholders. As the flowers go up too, they get further in the distance, so the shape should get smaller. Remember I said it was like fabric or a pattern? That's kind of how I'm approaching this. It's not bad, it's actually kind of nice. And it's okay that these are floating, right? Because I did the work underneath, right? That loose brushwork of all those leaves. I did some work underneath so that I can kind of get away with that. So this doesn't look like it's floating. It looks like there's leaves behind it. Okay, so there's my placeholders for red. I could go and finish them now, but I think I'd be better served getting in those other colored flowers. So I kind of did the red-orange ones, so maybe now I'll move on to the purple-pink ones. How do you mix a purple-pink? Well, I just take my purple, my red, and add some white. I'm not very fussy when it comes to color. I think there's more than one way to get to the right color. Okay, so this flower here, that has a little more white in it, so it's a bit more opaque, right? If you want something to have a stronger opacity, go ahead and add a little bit of white. Right, yellow on top, so maybe I just fill in the whole flower purple, right? Because the base is more purple. Those yellow on top flowers are great. I think that's why I chose to photograph them in the first place. Okay. You know, we're not counting flowers, so you don't have to overdo it. There's my purple. Now what's left? I have some yellow and orange. And we're getting there. Most of the work, believe it or not, is done. Ooh, now look at that. Too much water, too much yellow. Remember I said yellow is very transparent. So I might need to add some white. This is just the base. There, and I had a pencil line underneath. Believe it or not, that helped inform where I put that flower on top. Okay, here's some more. These are kind of different shaped flowers. This brush is still doing okay. There's another pencil line. It's funny, the line disappeared, but I could still see the indentation. And it's looking nice. And near the top, they get smaller. Going a little thicker with the paint too. I didn't mention that, but in the beginning I use less paint. Near the end, when I get to little details, I use more. All right, what's left? Blue. There's a really incredible blue flower. I'm going to add a little bit of white to lighten it up and make it a little more opaque. Is that good? Maybe a little darker. I have so many blues down here on my palette. There we go. A nice rich blue. And it's nice with that white mixed in as well. Blue and yellow, that will be a nice combination. There's an artist I love, Gustav Klimt, that does painting like pattern a lot of times. So the way I'm adding these flowers down, it's a lot like a pattern that we're just finding in nature, right? It's kind of a combo of both. All right, so I basically did the work to have something really complicated come through in a simple way. I did darks, right, in the shadow areas. Then I kind of did medium greens and light greens. And then I started adding flowers on top. The last step is to go back now that the paint's a little dry and start pulling out this really bright, intense color. You could see it here because you could see the color as it dries kind of sinks down into the canvas, or into the paper in this case. Time to switch to a smaller brush. So I was using kind of a thicker brush here for most of the flowers, but now I'm gonna go and add some more thicker paint, more detail on top of the color that I already laid down. And you can see here that the color kind of sunk in to the paper. So a tiny bit of water, but mostly paint. So let's see what we get. So what the challenge is here is sometimes the colors are transparent. So this is a common complaint with acrylic, that the colors just don't lay on top of another color the way you might expect, and the way maybe oil might, because oil is very thick paint. But adding a little yellow, a little white, that certainly helps. And look at that. They're starting to come through. You just might need to add more paint. At this step, more paint is a good thing. Not in the beginning, because if you don't like your placement of a flower, it's very hard to erase thick paint. But at this kind of place in the painting's life, thicker paint is great. And oranges and reds, I should say, are hard to get that bright color sometimes, to get it pure, especially when you're layering on top of green. But I think they're doing an okay job here, coming through. And I'm trying to vary it too, meaning I'm trying to have different flowers feel like they have different amounts of light on them, right? This one is a little bit more red than maybe this one here. Okay, and as we go up, they get more red. And I just add a little bit of water to keep the paint kind of flowing. And the small brush is great because for every little brush stroke is maybe a little petal on top of each flower. So using the right tool for the job. And you'd be amazed what you can get away with. People will think that you counted flower petals, when in fact, you just kind of guessed. All right, I could also go back to those in a minute, but you can kind of decide now how things look. And I think they're looking okay. And you can see they're brighter in front, maybe get a little darker in back. Maybe this one goes a little thicker. This is why we paint the step right here. I'm moving quickly because it's a demonstration, but if you were to spend a lot of time with this step, this is where I would say, spend your time. This is the fun stuff. All right, let's go to that purple pink, kind of going in the same order that I did the base coat in. There's beautiful color there. And again, little dots, right? Each little dot looks like a petal. And I've done the work already. Remember, these ones were yellow on top, so I'm going to do the purple kind of around the sides. It's important to maybe leave some a little darker than others too. Not overdo it. We can easily overdo it. Just a couple petals. Brush stroke should be kind of smaller in back, right? Okay, let me go with yellow here. And not yellow alone, add some white. Okay, let's see. Aha, that's pretty nice. Just a few here. You could just hint at it. If you do a couple in the front that are really strong, you don't need to do it for every one. This is more yellow and orange mixed. Remember pattern? Pattern is the same kind of shape repeated. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, and the inside of this flower is like on fire here. All right, so I used a really kind of thick orange. Pretty nice. All right, where to? Well, I think we were on to yellow. The blue flowers almost look done to me. I don't not need to do too much at all for those. Let me get some orange here. These are like polka dotted. There's all kinds of good stuff going on in these. Okay, let me add some pink. I didn't realize these flowers here, just how much color is happening. I have some paint on the brush that's unmixed, meaning there's white and orange and pink all together. Kind of perfect for what's happening there. And if you see things along the way that you want to change, go for it. It's all layers, guys. Okay. And I get to decide how fussy I want to be today. Today I'm feeling kind of loose, right? Sometimes I ruin paintings by adding too much detail. That's a thing where a good artist knows when to quit, when to stop. And I think Picasso said an artist never truly finishes an artwork. They just abandon it. So I'm going to stop there on those flowers. The blue flowers, honestly, I don't really see anything I need to do. I like the way it laid down. Sometimes you get lucky, and you get a brush stroke that's absolutely perfect from the start. Okay, one thing I'm going to do before I pull the tape off is I might bring out a couple more leaves and then definitely some stems. But I think I'm going to start with the stem. So I'm going to add some white to some green and keep the thin brush. So I have a very kind of pointed brush here. You can see here. So I'm thinking this stem here, and it should be one motion. If I have to go too slow, my hand shakes and I don't get it. So I'm gonna just do that one stroke. See that? Kind of quick. There's another one here. Kind of quick. Just adding a few of those in a few spots. It will make that pattern that I have way more interesting. As we get up here, near the top, the stem is actually darker, which is interesting, right? Your reference will always be more interesting than what you think is happening. So let me do some dark. You want the paint to be kind of wet too, so keep going and adding water. All right, that certainly helps. Okay, now switch back to that smaller brush. Smaller, bigger brush, I should say. I was just on a really small brush, but that maybe I should say a medium-sized brush. Nick, you could edit that so that makes sense. Okay, and what I want to do is just bring out a couple leaves here with this kind of medium-sized brush that I was using for the leaves in the beginning. Some did not end up as light or bright as I wanted them. So I'm just going to add a few more leaves in just a couple spots just to bring them out. Another layer won't hurt. And look at that. This is a type of painting that will really never end unless I say it's over. So you can keep adding detail till you're satisfied. That's important. You get to dictate how detailed, how exact things are. And that's why we have such an array of art with different amounts of detail. I'm going to go really bright up here. Bright leaves. Remember to keep them varied. Don't make every one exactly the same. Okay. All right, maybe that leaf right here. I'm going to call it. Okay, before we peel off the tape, I just need to sign it. I like to usually pick a corner and pick maybe some color that shows up somewhere in the painting. So I'm going for this kind of orange red. Red is a very nice color for signatures, just here in the corner. You can do your last name or your initials. I'm going to do a little monogram I created. That's an H for Halloran with a little J snuck in for Jim. Okay, and there's my little symbol. As an artist, you get to make up symbols. So let's peel this tape off. This is the magic I was talking about in the beginning. And go slow. You might peel off some paper. Not a big deal. Okay. Look at how clean that edge looks. Gently, carefully. I'm going to move the iPad here. And acrylic is another word for plastic. So you can see it's like plastic, and you have that nice clean edge on the bottom against the tape. Look at that. Okay. Peel off a little paper, but not a big deal. No one will notice in the end. So there we go. And there it is. And that clean edge really makes something that looks kind of natural and chaotic, right? It makes it look very tight and clean, kind of like a snapshot or a photograph. And it's a way I love to present my artwork. So there you have it, something very complicated like nature with thousands of leaves and hundreds of flowers into something kind of manageable and beautiful. And that's why we're painting. So I am Jim Halloran, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.